Amazing how Margaret Brown, the person, was almost completely transformed through this play, and that would become a movie. It really starts immediately upon her death in 1932. Here in Denver, there are two obituaries written about her life, one in the Rocky Mountain News, one in the Denver Post. The Rocky Mountain News embellishes sort of the accounts of her life already. In her obituary, we're already embellishing and adding things like, you know, she was raised on the milk of a nanny goat and married this Leadville Johnny. So in her obituary already, things are getting manufactured. And then her obituary becomes a short story in a book written by reporter Gene Fowler, in his book Timberline, where he sort of writes a chapter about this woman and further embellishes her story. And then those embellishments get picked up by a young author here in Denver named Carolyn Bancroft, who is now growing up in 30s, 40s Denver, where you still have, I mean, we're just not that far away from everything that propelled the Browns into the spotlight. So you have a young Carolyn Bancroft who's sort of, growing up in a city that still talks about how we had things like these divides, like Catholic versus Protestant, new money versus old money, where really no one had old money because our city's not that old, So those divisions are still sort of percolating through culture here in Denver. And sort of that colors Carolyn Bancroft's lens when she's talking about Margaret. Then you have a young Richard Morris who is wanting to write his next blockbuster Broadway play and comes out west trying to find some sort of, inspirational but fun person to base it on, and keeps getting told stories about this, person who was, gold and new money and connected to the Titanic. And we actually have a letter in our collection from Richard Morris where he says, I changed her name to Molly. It was easier for us to sing, to perform on stage if she's Molly. And Molly's actually sort of a derogatory name for a young Irish girl. So even changing her name to Molly, we're already stripping away her power and her identity as a person. So as a woman who was most often referred to in society as Mrs. J.J. Brown, as her husband's wife, and then we strip away her name of Margaret and change it to Molly. So we're sort of chipping away at her identity after the decades after she passes away. And then by the time the Hollywood play becomes a Hollywood movie, she's almost transformed and unrecognizable. So we're punishing this strong woman by making her unaccepted, by making her uneducated, and sort of taking away the very things that made her so, amazing and unique and powerful as a woman. So we have, 1950s and 60s when we have, men coming back to war and wanting their jobs back from women who stepped up and, helped on the production lines and in factories and things like that. So women are finding that I kind of want to be at work. I don't want to be relegated back to being a housewife. So you have this weird tension happening. So as this play/movie is coming about, you also have this tension in American culture between men and women, and sort of women wanting greater roles and not being relegated to being housewives and mothers. And you had Margaret, 50, 60 years ago, who also wanted to be more than a housewife and mother. She wanted to transform the world around her. So Hollywood certainly transformed her story, but I think not in a good way, so that by the time this house was saved in 1970, it really was due to the movie, this movie's success. I mean, Debbie Reynolds and Harve Presnell, the star of the movies, they did the debut here in Denver. But her family, Margaret's family, they were just sort of horrified by what was happening. And for them, this is sort of distant memory, like, was Grandma really like this, and we don't really know, and they just sort of turned away and didn't do anything to help correct some of the myths that were forming about her. And then when we just look in Western history in general, we see Western history punishing strong women more often than not. So there's always an element of, either you're a saloon girl or a prostitute, or you fill those kind of roles. And it's less often being a partner or cohort or helpmeet for women. So Western women are often seen that way. We're wild, we're untamed, we're uncontrollable, all of these sort of adjectives that get used to describe Western women, and sort of how do we deal with Western women, especially when so many women who came out here wanted something different. They already wanted to buck gender norms, so I think that's just one way that our culture deals with those gender norms out here in the West, is we tend to punish them.